Saw X is directed by the franchise's mainstay editor Kevin Grutart and is set between Saw 1 and 2, giving us some more context between what happened after the classic bathroom trap with Adam and Gordon in the first film and before the nerve gas house part 2. And I was extremely excited to see this thing. I'll say I'm a huge fan of Saw, and I gotta say, I enjoyed it. But not quite as much as I was expecting to, and I'm sorry for that emotional roller coaster, but that's just how things are. You know, Saw X, it was definitely another Saw film. I can give it that. I can say that. It's another Saw film, and that's kind of just a good thing in its own right. And with that, I can say that this, yes, is probably going to make my top 10 list of the year, but again, it's probably not going to make it to the top of that list this year. Like Spiral before it, Saw X is another addition to a franchise that I love, but left me kind of coming out of the cinema like, that was good, instead of raving about it like I was really hoping to. But hey, my wife, who was also a huge fan of Saw, also walked out of the cinema with me, delighted, and loved this thing. So maybe don't take my word for it. I don't know, I'm not the movie police. Make up your own mind, you know? It was nice to see some particular things, like having John Kramer back in a movie, and probably with the most screen time that we've seen in this entire franchise, maybe? I don't know, he is in 2 and 3 a lot, I suppose, and I guess he's in Jigsaw a lot, right? Or maybe he's not in Jigsaw that much. I don't remember, I haven't watched it in a while, but the point is, he's definitely in this film a hell of a lot more than he is in those later sequels, and technically more than he is in the first one. I mean, technically he's there the entire time in the first one, but I mean, it doesn't really count, does it? But he is here for the overall story entirely in this film, and is essentially the protagonist of this film. So there is a hell of a lot of John Kramer here, and it's just nice to see, sort of. Because this film is just as much about John Kramer as it is about Jigsaw, if that makes any sense. We see what his life is about outside of, you know, being Jigsaw, being the cancer patient that he is, being just the man of high moral beliefs that he is, and all that sort of thing. Like, we see different sides of him here. And we also see that gruesome side of him as he puts people into horrible, torturous traps as well. You know, the movie doesn't exactly forget that he's a monster, but it also does sort of forget that he's a monster during some moments, and shows him in sort of more of a sympathetic light as well. And we see him as a true sort of hero in this movie, which is sort of a twist in its own right. It's not a plot twist that has you shocked, but it's kind of turning the formula on its head a little bit, to give it some credit. I'll also say that this movie has a great sweet spot between being visually gruesome and ugly and low-tech and full of harsh yellows and murky greens, like the original series is known for, but is also a little bit more sleek and stylish and nice looking than that, you know? It's like this perfect little in-between of feeling kind of like a modern Saw film, but playing like a throwback to the original series as it takes place between films from the original run as well. And I just thought that that was really well done. By the way, speaking of, I gotta talk about the traps, right? Like, if you're in this film or this franchise for that, obviously, the traps are gruesome as always, you know? Though, I will say that some of them did feel a bit familiar at this point. I was watching some of them and I'm like, I've kind of seen this at this point, you know? And there aren't hundreds of traps or anything in this film, but a handful of select few set pieces, which all have bloody results, and a few of them definitely do stand out creatively. But I wasn't necessarily watching this film for the traps, and barring 2 of them, which were funnily enough the very first 2 to feature, the traps did begin to feel a bit like endurance tests, momentary waiting periods till we get to the conclusion on whether or not the subject lives or dies, and then after that the plot can then continue. I guess that's how all Saw films kind of work though, so this is nothing new, and I love Saw, but the traps aren't necessarily what I love about them. But again, if you are in this franchise just for the traps, I will say that some of them had me squirming, some of them were pretty memorable and horrible, especially one of the very first few that is in this film. It was like kind of nasty shit. Also, there's that eye-sucking one that's on all the posters and everything. And I don't know, it's a bit more unique than most traps that we've seen in Saw. So it's a bit of fun. Anyway, as for the plot and twists and turns, I won't spoil anything, but I will say that I honestly was left a bit disappointed by the simplicity of it all. This film felt a bit similar again to Spiral in that way. I saw things coming and I didn't really have my mouth open ajar at any point in shock. Like, that part just didn't really happen for me. You know, I saw things coming. You know, there were some clever little things that delighted me, among some contrivances, sure, but hey, this is a Saw movie, man. That's what they're kind of all about, right? Saw X to me, in the end, feels ultimately unnecessary, to be honest. Like, it was a nice little nostalgic trip down this horrible lane, but it didn't really justify its own existence, in my opinion. This doesn't add a lot to the lore, and it doesn't really change the primetime events of the series. Instead, it gets in and out, fitting within the timeline nicely, and not really directly altering it all that much. I had a good time with it. It'll be part of the rewatches whenever I get around to doing that next time, and ultimately, I do think that this was was a pretty intense, well done Saw film with great characterization, I will say as well. But it did leave me kind of wanting more, if I'm being honest. I was a bit underwhelmed. I thought it was going to be this epic conclusion with all these answers and all these different things and everything, and it just didn't quite give me what I wanted in that way. Maybe I was expecting too much as like this big fanboy or something. I can definitely see that being a possibility, but you know, I also have to be honest. I'm not just going to lie and you know, just as this big fan say, I loved everything about it and it was the most perfect film I've ever seen in my life. No, I'm not going to do that. These are my honest opinions. I'm just a guy. I'm a human. I have nuanced thoughts about things. I can criticize the things that I love, and there are some things to criticize about this not being as epic as I wanted it to be, I suppose. But I do think it was well done for what it was going for, if that makes any sense. I guess, to be fair, I can't criticize the movie for what I wish it was, and I have to talk about what the movie for what it was. And with that, I do think it was a well done film that I liked. I just didn't think it was as surprising as I think it thought it was, and that kind of sucked if I'm being honest. But yeah, I don't know, those are my thoughts on Saw X. If you've seen it, let me know what you think and all that stuff. But I'm gonna go, but before you go, please do the things which are like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit, and I'm out of here. Goodbye.